I like that phrase in the video, whoever understands people the best wins. I think there is a lot of truth in that idea, especially because at the end of the day, business is one of the most human things in the world. I always giggle when CEOs say, especially after bad news, nothing personal, it's just business. It's the most personal thing in the world. It's human beings coming to work with other human beings that they're trying hard to trust, they're trying hard to cooperate with, and they're trying hard, you hear it in business all the time, we're trying to build relationships with our customers. Well, isn't that human? Isn't that personal? But I think the marketing industry, and I come from the marketing industry so I can say this, is guilty of not actually really trying to understand people. I think very often the marketing industry takes data and runs with a trend as if it were a gospel, not understanding the root of that trend, whether that trend is healthy or unhealthy. Just the fact that it's a trend means we should do it. For example, kids these days are doing everything on apps. That means we need to make more apps. But has anybody ever asked, is that healthy? Well, I think really great marketers, like really great leaders, do two things. They have unique ability to empathize and understand, and they have a unique perspective on the world. So let's start with empathy. Let's empathize with a generation that seems to confound our modern day. I think these millennials confound marketers, but even as I travel around, 100% of the talks that I give, no joke, and 100% of the meetings that I have, people will raise their hand, someone will raise their hand and ask the question, the millennial question, the millennial problem. Apparently they're unleadable. Apparently they're narcissistic, and apparently they're entitled, as they've been told. And if you're a millennial sitting in this room, how many times have you been told that you're entitled? Yeah, oh, you're nodding, okay. I think we as marketers and we as business people have done a very poor job of truly empathizing and truly understanding this generation. I've made 4 observations that I think help break it down. One is parenting, the other one is technology, the third one is impatience, and the last one is environment. We have to truly understand people if we want to talk to people. So let's talk about parenting. This young generation has been subject to what has been described as a failed parenting strategy. Many of them were raised being told the entire time that they're special and that they can have anything they want just because they want it. Some of them got into honors classes not because they deserved it, but because their parents complained, and some of them got A's not because they earned them, but because the teachers didn't want to deal with the parents. This is the generation that was given participation ribbons, in other words, medals for coming in last. And the data on this is clear already, that it devalues the feelings for the people who actually work hard to come in first, and it makes those who come in last actually feel stupid. It makes them feel worse because they know they don't deserve it. It actually is counterproductive. Then all of a sudden, they graduate school, they get a job, and something happens. They discover immediately that they're not special. They discover immediately that they cannot have whatever they want just because they want it. They discover immediately that their parents cannot help them get a promotion, and you get nothing for coming in last. In fact, I've heard stories where parents are filling out job applications for their kids or showing up to interviews with their kids. This is insane. But the point is in a flash, their entire self-image is completely shattered. And what you find is that there's an entire generation that's growing up with less self-confidence than previous generations. Also, don't forget, they've grown up in a Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook world where they are extremely good at filtering and curating the lives the way they want us to see them, not the way they actually are. They sound tough, and we do as they say because they seem to confound us. So we ask them, what do you want? And they say, we want bean bags and free food at work. And so we give them bean bags and free food, and nothing changes. That's like asking kids, do you want candy or spinach? They sound like they know all the answers, and they keep telling you that you should listen to them, and at the end of the day, there's fear, there's anxiety, there's uncertainty, and they don't know the answers. But they are extremely good at putting on a brave face. Lower self-esteem and an ability to hide it, which then goes into technology. This is a generation that has grown up with technology unlike any other previous generation, right? We know that when we engage with social media or our cell phones, there's a chemical in our body called dopamine that is released. Now, dopamine is the same chemical that makes us feel good when we cross something off our to-do lists, when we find something we're looking for, like, here are my keys, right? When you win the client, right? When you hit the goal, yes! That feeling, that elation, comes from this chemical in our body called dopamine. Well, we know that dopamine is released when we engage with social media or our cell phones, right? It's why it feels good when our phones go buzz, bing, flash, or beep. Yes, we all hate all our email. We love the buzz, bing, flash, or the beep, right? We've all had the experience where you're feeling a little down, you're feeling a little bit sorry for yourself. What do? You send out 10 texts to 10 friends. Hi, 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 hoping that one of them responds because it feels good, right? So we also know that there are other things that release dopamine, like alcohol, nicotine, and gambling. And so almost all addiction is a dopamine-based addiction. We know that almost all alcoholics discovered alcohol when they were teenagers. When we're very, very young, the only approval we need is approval from our parents. Then as we get older, we go through this conversion during adolescence, where we now crave the approval of our peers. Very, very stressful time, very, very full of high anxiety, and we're supposed to learn to rely on our friends. Some people, quite by accident, discover the numbing effects of dopamine, discover alcohol, and that connection becomes hardwired. So for the rest of their lives, whenever they suffer some sort of stress, they don't turn to a person, they turn to the bottle, right? Now, we have age restrictions on alcohol, smoking, and gambling, and we have no age restrictions on social media or cell phones. This is the equivalent of throwing open a liquor cabinet and saying to our teenagers, hey, I know this adolescence thing is going to be really stressful, try the vodka, it'll get you through it. That's ostensibly what we're doing. We give unfettered access to a highly, highly addictive device to a generation whose brains are not strong enough yet to discern, which is why we have age restrictions on alcohol, nicotine, and gambling, because the young mind is not yet developed enough to make those decisions. And so what we have is an entire generation growing up with an addiction that has not yet been labeled an addiction. More importantly, an inability to deal with stress, because they haven't learned those coping mechanisms of turning to a human being. They turn to devices. This produces some really negative effects. We're starting to see amongst this generation increases in suicide. We're seeing increases in accidental deaths due to drug overdoses. We're seeing increases in depression. Universities are dealing now with in epidemic proportions of kids requesting leaves of absence due to depression and an over-reliance on drugs to make them feel better. I have a friend, she's 28 years old, she was over my apartment, we were working together, and it hit about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she opens up her bag and pops an Adderall. And I turned to her and go, what are you doing? She goes, I'm having trouble concentrating. I said, that's because it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She had convinced herself that it was her, that her inability to concentrate in the afternoon was because she was somehow broken, and that her mind was somehow not working, and the only way she saw to fix that was that she took a pill because she wanted to maintain optimal productivity all day, which is not how human beings work. So you have lower self-esteem and an inability to cope with stress. They haven't learned coping mechanisms and the ability to rely on or ask for help from another human being. And then you add in the third one, impatience. This is a generation that has grown up in a world of instant gratification. If you want to buy something, you go on Amazon and it shows up the next day. If you want to watch a movie, you don't check movie times, you just stream it whenever you want to watch it. You don't wait week to week to week to watch a TV show. You just binge watch the whole weekend, right? In fact, if you want to go on a date, you just swipe right. You don't even have to learn the skill set of like, hey. You could be a stud, sit on your couch, 4 dates in an afternoon. And so the problem is now they believe that everything in their lives can happen instantaneously, including relationships and job fulfillment. And nothing could be further from the truth. They think it's like a scavenger hunt. You hear this, right? I talk to amazing, smart, ambitious, idealistic, hardworking, fantastic kids. They're right out of school, they're in their entry-level jobs, and I'll sit down with them and I go, how's it going? And they say to me, I think I'm gonna quit. And I say, why? They say, I'm not making an impact. I am like, you know you've been here 8 months, right? And so what they do is they go from job to job to job. They keep quitting their jobs or they get fired. It's always, it's a mutual understanding. And they keep going as if they're looking to make an impact. They're looking to find the job of their dreams. It's like looking for love. It's not like, here it is, found it. Oh. Love is not something you find. It's something you work hard every single day to stay in love. You don't discover job fulfillment. You work very hard every single day of your life to keep fulfillment in your job. And the problem is they want all of those feelings of anxiety that they have, the feelings of insecurity or loneliness that they have, and they want it all fixed immediately. So they go looking and looking and looking and looking and not finding anything. 28 years old, had 5 jobs. They tell me, these are their words, not mine, that they struggle to form deep, meaningful relationships. Many of them will admit that most of their friendships are superficial, that they cannot rely on their friends in dark times, and that they would not be surprised if their friends canceled on them because some better plans came up. They will admit this. And they will admit that they struggle to form the deep, meaningful relationships that are required to be a successful human being. As social animals, we need close relationships. Technology cannot fill the gap. I love technology. There's nothing wrong with technology. The problem is balance. It can live alongside our lives. It can live alongside our relationships. It cannot replace our relationships. They could have put a video of me up here today with me not standing here. I could have said everything exactly the same. I could have even done it live and stood in a studio. Would it feel the same, or is it better to have me here? Of course it's better to have me here. I would agree. If I were to come to your house for dinner, and you make me a lovely dinner, and the next day I send you an email saying, what a wonderful host you are, what a wonderful time I had. Or 3 days later, you get a handwritten note from me with the exact same words as were in the email. Which one makes you feel better? Handwritten note. Same words, same intent, same sentiment. The difference is we know, you know, it took me a few extra moments, it took me a little more time and a little more energy to send you that note, and you felt it. Time and energy. We're using technology to try and eliminate human time and energy, but it's time and energy, the sacrifice of those non-redeemable commodities, that makes human beings feel valued and valuable. I hear this all the time. I talk to executives, and they always try to say to me proudly, we really care that our employees love working for our company. I'm like, how do you know that? Did you hire some outside consultancy to conduct an online survey of your employees to see if they love working there? And they go, yeah. I'm like, okay, riddle me this, Batman. What if you were to send an email to your son? Dear son, your mom and I really care that you feel like you're a valuable member of this family. Please tell me candidly how we can be better parents, because we love you. Love, Dad. Or you walk into his room, you sit on his bed, and you say, son, your mom and I really care that you feel like you're a valuable member of this family. Please tell me what you think we can do better as parents, because we love you. Same words, same intention, same sentiment. The only difference is in only one of those examples, does he feel you care? And this is the other problem. It's the environment that we're creating with so much technology, right? So you have a generation that's growing up with lower self-esteem, addicted to technology, a lack of coping mechanisms, and they want all of their problems fixed immediately. They want everything fixed immediately. It's as if they're standing at the foot of a mountain and they can see the thing that they want. They can see the summit. I want to make an impact. What they don't see is the mountain. this large immovable object called the journey. You can go quickly, you can go slowly. This is not about doing your time. I don't care if you take a helicopter up the mountain, but there's still a mountain. And life, and friendships, and love, and job fulfillment is hard work, and it's going to require a lot of help because it's uphill, and it's going to take time. And you may never reach the summit, but that's not the point. The point is how you feel along the journey. And this generation has missed that, and they want everything solved immediately. They're not entitled. They are not entitled. They are impatient. The last one is perhaps the most egregious of all of the observations, and that is environment. Because we are taking this amazing, idealistic, smart, hardworking, fantastic group of human beings that have been dealt a bad hand, and we have no empathy for the hand that they've been dealt. And sometimes as marketers, we are irresponsible because what we do is shove more technology at them because that's what kids these days want, never considering how they actually feel. And we're starting to see a backlash. We're starting to see people put their phones away. We're starting to see people shut down their Facebook accounts. We're starting to see the rise of organizations like Meetup again. You look at the popularity of Airbnb, which is using technology to bring human beings together, but not using technology to replace human beings being together. Give people that, and they will fall in love with you, and they will fall in love with the brands that you represent. We are the most egregious offenders. The environments that we're asking these wonderful kids who are dealt a bad hand to work in, most of the business environments that we're building are based on business theories that are left over from the 80s and 90s. And we are suffering the ill effects of those ill-conceived theories now. For example, the concept of shareholder supremacy, where we put the interests of an external constituency ahead of the people who work inside our business, which is the same as a coach who's trying to build a strong team, prioritizing the needs of the fans over the needs of the players. That's what that is. The concept of shareholder supremacy was a theory proposed in the late 1970s and popularized in the 80s and 90s. The concept of mass layoffs, using mass layoffs to balance the books, did not exist in the United States prior to the 1980s. It was popularized in the 80s and 90s. Boom years of relative peace, a kinder, gentler Cold War. All of these theories that were proposed were in the name of profit and individuality, individualism. In the 80s and 90s, they eviscerated the Glass-Steagall Act. The Glass-Steagall Act was passed after the Great Depression to prevent another Great Depression from happening. It was eviscerated in the 80s and 90s. Do you know how many stock market crashes we had between the Great Depression and the dismantling of Glass-Steagall? The answer is 0. We had 0 stock market crashes in 50 years because it worked. It made illegal things like one bank owning investment and commercial banks, for example, in one institution. It banned that. We've now reversed that. Since the dismantling of Glass-Steagall, we had the '87 crash, we had the dot-com boom, and 2008. We've had 3 since we removed our own reforms, all in the name of individual profit. All of these theories that were popularized in the 80s and 90s in these boom years, these are no longer boom years. This is not a time of relative peace, and the internet and globalization has completely changed the rules of the game. What worked then cannot work now. And so we're asking these wonderful kids to go work in companies where they know that their leaders prioritize a number over a person. They know that if the company misses its arbitrary projections, they may lose their job. What kind of stability, security, confidence does that help a human being build? The answer is that it destroys it. At least the rest of us at least have a memory of a different time. They think that's how business works. It doesn't. Those are choices made by leaders. And I would argue we have an incredible lack of good leadership in the world today, in every industry. And I talk to them all, and the problems are all the same. That's called empathy. Understanding the behaviors and what motivates somebody, not just looking at the superficial trend and saying, well, if they're doing that, we should do it more. If somebody's drinking a lot, the trend is they use alcohol to numb the pain. That doesn't mean give them more alcohol. That means understand where they're coming from and give them that. We have a responsibility as marketers to help our clients use technology to bring people together. We have a responsibility as companies to offer the people who work in our companies a sense that we're helping them build their confidence, that we're helping them overcome their addictions, that we're going to teach them patience, and we're going to teach them how to build strong personal relationships. We don't have a choice. We have a higher burden upon us. And there's so many little things that we can do that we are failing horribly at, that are so easy. Let me show you one. Can I borrow someone's phone, please? Anyone? Thank you. Okay, there is a subconscious reaction to these devices when we use them, okay? What if I were to hold my phone while I'm talking to you? I'm not checking it, it's not buzzing, it's not beeping, I'm nothing, I'm just holding it. Do you feel at this moment that you are the most important thing to me right now? No, you do not. Because there is a subconscious reaction we have to the device. When it is out, it makes the people around us feel that they are less important. So when we're walking down the halls in our offices and somebody says, hey boss, can I ask you a question? You go, sure, what's on your mind? We've just told them they're not that important. Or we can go, sure, what's on your mind? And if you don't have a pocket, find a shelf, put it on the shelf, come back and say, sure, what's on your mind? When we show up to a meeting, or a lunch, or a dinner, with our colleagues, our clients, or our friends, or our families, and we put the phone on the table, we have announced to everyone in the room that they are not that important to us. And by the way, putting the phone upside down is not more polite. My favorite one is in the meeting or at a lunch with someone that the phone will ring and the caller ID will pop up and they will go, I'm not going to get it. Oh, so magnanimous. Oh, I'm lucky to eat with you today. Or they could just put the damn thing away. You can tell how addicted we are. When somebody pulls out their phone when you're with them, how uncomfortable does that make us feel? You're walking down the street with someone, they pull their phone out. We feel stupid, so what do? We pull our phones out. We're so addicted. Somebody goes to the bathroom when we're at dinner, and what do we have to sit there by ourselves? God forbid we should look around the room for 5 minutes. We pull our phones out. Meetings, awful. What do we do when a meeting happens, right? Everybody's sitting waiting for the meeting to start. Bob's running a few minutes late. Bob's here? Okay, start the meeting. Do you know when relationships are built? All that in between time. Thank you very much. Can you catch? Relationships aren't built out of thin air. They take time. It's consistency versus intensity. You can't get in shape by going to the gym for 9 hours. It doesn't work that way. But if you go to the gym every single day for 20 minutes, you will absolutely get into shape. Consistency matters more than intensity. Intensity is going to the dentist twice a year, as prescribed. And if you only did that, all your teeth will fall out. We like intensity because it's easy to measure. I know exactly what time I'm going to the dentist, I know the date, I know how long I'm going to be there, and I know the results. This is how we teach leadership. We have a big seminar, we have an off-site, we have a couple speakers, everybody gets a certificate, we give the speakers high reviews, 8.5, I had a great time, I'm a leader now. No. You don't fall in love with one big beautiful dinner and a bouquet of flowers. It's the little stuff. It's brushing your teeth every day for 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes in the evening. By itself, it does nothing. Nothing. It's the consistency. It's the repeat that makes our teeth healthy. And that's how relationships are built too. The way we build friendships, the way we build trust, the way we build camaraderie is when we're waiting for Bob because we're a little late, because he's a little late. We talk. Hey, I heard your dad was in the hospital. Is he okay? Oh yeah, thank you, he's much better, he's home now, thank you for asking. Hey, whatever happened with that client? I heard something exploded. Oh my God, it was insane. By itself, it does nothing. But when we create environments in which those kinds of conversations happen on a daily basis, by removing the technology and allowing people to connect, you will see a rise in trust, a rise in cooperation. You will see a building of confidence. You will see an ability to rely on people. And why is it important to rely on people and trust people? So we can create environments of vulnerability. Vulnerability doesn't mean walking around crying. Vulnerability means creating an environment in which somebody feels safe enough to raise their hand and say, I made a mistake. I don't know what I'm doing. You asked me to do a job I feel ill-equipped to do. I'm scared. I'm nervous. I'm lonely. We haven't done that. And we've unfortunately exaggerated so many of these things. We've made the feelings worse. That is our responsibility, both inside our companies and as marketers, through our product and for our clients. Human. Whoever understands people the best wins. That's true. I'll give you one final little thought. It's about perspective. In game theory, there are two kinds of games. There are finite games and there are infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective. Baseball. We all know the rules, we all agree to them, and we all agree that whoever has more runs at the end of 9 innings is the winner. Nobody ever says, hold on, if we could just play 2 more innings, I'm sure we can come back. It doesn't happen, right? That's the rule. Those are the rules, right? Then there are infinite games. An infinite game is defined as known and unknown players. The rules are changeable, and the objective is to keep the game in play, to perpetuate the game. When you pit a finite player versus a finite player, the system is stable. Baseball is stable. When you pit an infinite player versus an infinite player, the system is also stable, because there can be no winners and losers. The Cold War worked because nobody can win and nobody can lose. That is a bad scenario. So you just keep the game in play, and what happens because there are no winners and losers in infinite contests, what happens is players drop out when they run out of the will or the resources to continue to play. That's how it works. Problems arise, however, when you pit a finite player versus an infinite player, because the finite player is playing to win, and the infinite player is playing to keep going. And the finite player will always find themselves in quagmire. This was the United States in Vietnam. The United States was fighting to win. The Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, were fighting to survive. This was the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. The Soviets wanted to beat the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen would fight for as long as is necessary. And the finite player will always find themselves in quagmire. Great marketers, great businesses know the game they're in. And it's amazing how many businesses don't play by the rules of the game that we're in. The game of business is an infinite game. The game of business has pre-existed every company that is on this planet, and it will outlast every single company that is on this planet. It is infinite. The players change, the rules change. Do you think MySpace was taken? They didn't even know Facebook existed. They were worried about Friendster. It's the competition we don't know about that always comes nipping at our heels, not the ones we're studying. In other words, new players, those are the rules. It's an infinite game. But if you listen to businesses, they're playing by finite rules. They're trying to beat their competition. They're trying to be number one. Based on what? Based on what criteria that everybody else has agreed to, based on what time frames that I've agreed to. We're number one. In what? Revenues, market share, profit, square footage, number of employees, who cares? Anyone can be number one if you make your own criteria, and that's what basically businesses do. No one else has agreed to the criteria. Everyone's trying to beat somebody else. It's a finite construction in an infinite game. And it produces quagmire. Let me tell you a story. I spoke at an education summit for Apple. I also spoke at an education summit for Microsoft, back in the Steve Ballmer days. At the Microsoft summit, I would say 70% of the executives spent 70% of their PowerPoints talking about how to beat Apple. At the Apple summit, 100% of the executives spent 100% of their presentations talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with beating their competition. The other one was obsessed with advancing their cause, or their why, as I like to call it, right? So at the end of my talk at Microsoft, they gave me a gift. They gave me the new Zune when it was a thing. And I got to tell you, this was the most elegant piece of technology I ever saw in my entire life. It was beautiful. The user interface was incredible. The design was stunning. It worked flawlessly. They didn't allow it to work with iTunes, so I couldn't use it, but that's different. But the technology itself was absolutely gorgeous. So in the back of a taxi with an Apple executive, sort of like employee number 12 kind of guy, and I decide to stir the pot. And I turn to him and I say, you know, Microsoft gave me their new Zune, and it is so much better than your iPod Touch. And he turns to me and he says, I have no doubt. Conversation over. Because the infinite player understands sometimes you're ahead and sometimes you're behind. Sometimes you're number one and sometimes you're number two. Sometimes you have the best product and sometimes you don't. The goal is not to win every battle. The goal is to outlast your competition. The finite player is competing against everybody else. The infinite player is competing against themselves. How do we make our work better than the work we did last year? How do we advance down the field more than we did last year? How do we as individuals, how do we wake up every morning and be better versions of ourselves today than we were yesterday? Think about it in an interpersonal way, right? Do you want to be better than your friends, or do you want to be the best version of yourself? It's the same in business. And it's the infinite players who frustrate their competition. Apple for years frustrated Microsoft. Southwest Airlines frustrates everybody. Costco frustrates Walmart. It's the infinite players. Jim Senegal, the founder and former CEO of Costco, talked about how Wall Street's in the business of quarters. He's in the business of building a business for the next 50 years. And when you do that, you make decisions very, very differently. And so the question isn't how do we be number one and how do we help our clients be number one. The question is how do we help our clients stay in the game longer than anybody else? Because players drop out when they run out of the will or the resources to play. Every single bankruptcy, almost every merger and acquisition is basically a player saying we no longer have the will or the resources to continue to compete. We either drop out of the game or we have to merge with another company so we can maintain a position in the game, or you drop out. And another player will replace you. The game doesn't end just because you drop out. It continues. This understanding, the ability to empathize for the people we're talking to, for the people who work with us, for the people we aim to serve, and understanding the game that we're in are the two things that the best leaders do and the best marketers do. Think about all the best marketers that we know about. Yes, we talk about Apple and Steve Jobs, true. But think about all the best marketers. They have they talk about their ability to understand people. But it's understanding this level of people. And it's answering questions, developing products, and developing messages that talk to them here, not here. And understanding the game that they're in. And waking up every single day to compete against themselves. This is the opportunity. This is the opportunity. I think the marketing industry is so powerful in its ability to push other companies in one direction or another. And there are so many things egregiously wrong in the business world today that we are looking for a white knight. We are looking for a champion, anyone, any company, any industry that has the courage to say, let's talk to people differently. Let's understand our role in business differently. Let's change our perspective and how we're going to play in the game. And the rest of us will follow, because that's what people do. That's what companies do. They follow the leader. And that leader will seem to have unbridled success and an unbridled ability to understand. I believe that so desperately. The one who understands people better is the one who wins. Thank you very much.